The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Stress to Logic and Firearm Mentor, your host. And today I have two gentlemen here from Tactical Grit. We have Todd Greenberg and Doug Silk. And before I start asking them some questions, and I'm going to properly introduce how I met them. A couple weeks ago, I was a speaker at the Midwest Security and Police Conference and Expo, which I started going to, I reached back into my files in 1997. So it used to be called the Midwest Security Conference, MSC. Now it is the MSPCE. And I delivered a seminar on how law enforcement and public safety in general can overcome the human stress response. And I'm always looking for people for my show. So I went to the vendor show and I stopped here and my eyes were like saucers. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then turns out with Todd and Doug, we lived in the same neighborhood at one point together, but we didn't know each other. So welcome to the show, Todd and Doug. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
I'd love to know, what are your individual, respective, personal origin stories? Tell our listeners about your background and how you got involved with Tactical Grit. Doug, why don't you go first?
My background is basically from a marketing standpoint. To be 100% honest with you, I have shot a gun all of one time, which was way back at overnight camp. So I was brought into the mix to help Todd out with managing the business as well as the marketing. Been doing digital marketing, search engine optimization, paid search ads, and everything else for about 25, 26 years. So obviously with an online presence being an absolute necessity to not only launch a product, but to help it be successful, Todd brought me into the mix to handle the day-to-day operations as well as everything online.
Awesome. Todd, what about you? What's your background?
So my background and history to date and still is in the packaging realm along with a manufacturing realm. So my family had a packaging business that was based in Lake Zurich, Illinois, called Team Packaging, that my father started. And I eventually went in and worked for him and took over that business. Sold it right before the pandemic, and I still to this day work for that company running their entire sales force around the country. So I've always had this background of rigid packaging, whether it's a bottle or tubes or jars, mostly plastic, but glass and metal. And then I also deal with a lot of contract manufacturers around the country that actually make products for people, whether it be in the personal care market, whether it be in the household, chemical, industrial, food, beverage, you name it, we can do it.
Terrific.
So that industry kind of led me into creating Tactical Grit, amongst a few other things. Yeah.
How did you two kids meet? And I say that to be facetious. I'm wondering if Doug just liked Todd's package or something.
You know, for the amount of times we spent on vacation together and all the other stuff, you would think that would have been part of it. Todd and I, once he moved into the neighborhood I lived in, when I was going to elementary school, it was right across the street. We wound up going to school together, junior high, all through high school. We wrestled against each other because at that time we were both roughly the same size and have stayed friends ever since. So it's really one of those stories of, you know, you make friends and you keep them for life.
That's terrific. Lifelong friends. I absolutely love it. Can you tell our listeners about Tactical Grit? What is it? And then we'll get into some details.
Tactical Grit is, in a nutshell, it is a waterless, lead neutralizing hand cleaner. Okay, and the purpose of it is basically when you are done shooting or when you are done cleaning your weapon, anytime you dealt with any type of gun residue, it leaves lead on your hands and on those surfaces. So what our product does is It neutralizes and helps eliminate that lead from being carried to, whether you were at the range or wherever it may be, to anywhere else you may be going throughout the day.
I will tell everyone I did have lead poisoning once. I was working at a shooting range where I spent 6 out of 12 hours of my shift physically on the range. Later on, I went for a blood test for cholesterol or something. And I said, why don't you test me for lead? I was 3 times the limit. So that was a long time ago. I didn't have any symptoms, although some people will say I have cognitive decline. Those are my family members. And I'm kidding when I say that. But what I was able to do before it was fashionable is put on an N95 mask and gloves. And 3 months later, it came back into regular or the normal range. And then on that specific range, it was the air handling system was subpar. Let's just put it that way. So that's what I had to do when I was working physically on the range. Not a big deal. So how does your product neutralize lead?
So the product is manufactured with chemicals, one of which is a chelating agent. Okay, and what a chelating agent does is it basically bonds with lead and heavy metal particles. Okay, and when it bonds with them, what it does is it kind of produces a field around that particle to where it doesn't contaminate other things, right? So it forms a shield, if you will, to protect, in this case, to protect that lead particle from anything. When those particles bond together, they also increase dramatically in size. So with that size increase, what it does is it prohibits the lead particles from entering your bloodstream through your skin and your pores. Okay, so between the fact that those particles have become too big, the grit, which is one of the ingredients in tactical grit, and the friction that your hands cause by rubbing the agent through your hands and everything else, those neutralized particles fall helplessly to the ground.
Interesting.
Right? They just kind of naturally fall off. And the best part is, they fall off the ground. Once you step on them, as I'm sure a lot of people know, it would stick to your shoes and it would track through and everything else. Even though that is the case, those particles that are being tracked are still neutralized and therefore have no health risks attached to them. That
is phenomenal. I wasn't asking that just for the show. I was asking that for me because I'm like, how does this work? Now I understand it, and so does everyone else.
Science.
Perfect. So there's a ton of health risks from lead exposure. Can you guys touch on what some of those are?
Sure. I mean, depending on, and you were kind of saying it earlier, when you had it, you didn't have really any symptoms. Depending on the individual person, people are, just like anything else, more susceptible to lead poisoning, more susceptible to the actual, side effects of it. But the ones that are actually most probably symptomatic could be your children or newborns. And so when you're going to a shooting range or you're training as a police officer and you bring that home, you're bringing it home and entering it into your house, it can affect your child who's never been to a gun range before. Anything from developmental delays and learning difficulties, weight loss, sluggishness, abdomen pain, vomiting, you name it, hearing loss, seizures. When it gets into adults, you got to think more of the long-term effects, high blood pressure, joint and muscle pain, problems with memory and concentration, headaches, mood disorders, all kinds of stuff. So it can certainly affect your lungs, your blood, your brain.
Maybe I have lead poisoning. I'm kidding. Just teasing. Yeah, so it is very, very dangerous. And like you just said, children are susceptible. I'd even say anyone with a reduced immune system is also susceptible. So anyone on like chemotherapy, elderly people, and it's very important to have good range hygiene. So we talked about your packaging. Where is the actual product made?
When I started this, and this is partially how my background really fit into this. I went to my father's very first customer, who was in Blue Island, Illinois, to talk to them, and they have a full service lab with chemists and everything. I still do business with that company today on the packaging side. His kids are now running the business. I've grown up in the industry with them. I walked in, had a meeting with them, told them exactly what I was trying to do, how I wanted the product to act, how I wanted the product to feel, different things that I wanted to accomplish with the product. They came up with about 6 formulas that we tried, and through trial and error and testing, we nailed it down to where we are extremely happy with it.
That's awesome. There's another product out there. It's called D-LED, and I'm not going to knock D-LED. I've used it. Typically, the soap that's in the bathrooms when you wash your hands afterwards are D-LED soap. It's just, to me, from a user endpoint user, it is just soap. But they have these wipes that a lot of people use, and I've used them a couple times. Honestly, they're not for me because they leave a sticky residue, and it's like a film, and it feels gross. So how is there any residue from your product?
So there is no residue. The biggest difference is that our product is waterless. So if you are on an outdoor range training or in a competition and there's no bathroom available or running water, our product is completely waterless. You put it in your hands, you rub it in until it dissipates, which probably on average takes about 10 seconds. That's the biggest difference. So D-LED is a good product. It is soap. It is meant to be in the bathroom, used with water. You have to wipe it off. The wipes are the same thing. You're essentially wiping your hands or your arms, and you still have that wipe that you have to get rid of, right? And throw in a garbage can. We don't have any of that. So not only do we think our formula is a superior formula, but there is a very big convenience factor to it. Throw the tube in your gun bag, throw an individual use in your gun bag or in your pocket, and you're done.
Can you talk about the effectiveness of your product?
Regular soap and water, even a good soap, antimicrobial or antibacterial, that is about 60% effective against lead. Hand sanitizer, which everybody thinks hand sanitizer kills everything, is actually 0% effective against lead. Our product has been tested, and the efficacy has come back at 99% effective.
Lead poisoning does affect cognitive function, but I'd say this is a no-brainer. Yeah, I have weird sense of humor. So, but seriously, it was the legitimate comment. This is a no-brainer. And if someone wanted to, here's what I really liked about the product, and you handed out samples. And I have not gone shooting since the conference, so I haven't actually used the product, although I did hand it out to a couple people who liked it after they went shooting. I go to a range, RMG Guns, and they don't have a bathroom adjacent to the range. You can always go into the store and wash your hands, but that's who I recommended. I'm actually going to be there later this afternoon, and this is recorded, so I'll already have been there when this airs. So if someone what I want to get to the point is that you had these little individual packets which are perfect for a range bag. I don't have to buy a gallon of it. I just have to buy the little packages, throw them in my bag, like you said. And if I am going to an outdoor range, which happens, they're easy. I can give them to students. So if someone wanted to order your product, whether they are an end user, a B2C, business to customer, or B2B, like a range or gun store, how could they order your product?
So you can certainly go to, tactical-grit.com. There is our office phone number is on there. You can certainly always call and ask us or order via the phone. whereas a lot of municipalities are probably going to do it that way from that website. Hopefully, eventually in every gun range that you walk into.
Very good. Very good. Can you talk about the pricing of your product?
Yeah. From a pricing standpoint, researching products in the market, and fortunately and unfortunately for us, there's nothing that we feel is comparable to the product that we are turning out. From a price point perspective, we are very, very close and very, very competitive to what we feel is reflective of what our competition would be charging for their products. Whether it be the gallon, whether it be the tube, whether it be the packets. If you go online and you look at the website, you will see that our pricing structure is a little bit higher than, for instance, D-Lead. We understand that. However, in our mind, we feel that we have created and are offering a far, far superior product to what they are offering. And we've done it at a point where we don't feel that we are taking advantage of everybody or trying to scare anybody into overpaying for a product, right? And when it comes down to it, we don't feel that you can really put a price on your health and your safety and that of your loved ones. But one of our core messages and one of our core foundations is, we're trying to make everybody safe, not, this isn't a get-rich scheme. So our pricing structure for a 3.5 ounce, a little bit under a 3.5 ounce tube, retail price is, I believe, around $15.99. The gallons, which are geared more towards municipalities or the gun ranges, are very competitive from a price point if they want to step up the offerings that they are giving either their officers or their range guests if the ranges are purchasing them. And then, as you said, the packets are priced very comparably to the tubes when you take a percentage of what an actual usage size would be from a tube and you're just putting it into an individual size packet.
Very good. And I'm looking at the packets, and they're $2 a piece. And I'm guessing you can't order one. It's got to be 50 or whatever the quantity is. This is why I loved it, because the packets are single use. I will tell you, if I bought the tube, and this is just my luck, I'd throw it in my bag, it would end up at the bottom, and I'd put 500 rounds of ammo on it, and it would squeeze the tube and squirt all over my bag, because that's the luck that I have. So
yeah, you say that, but again, harking back onto one of our core foundations in Todd's history in packaging, something we've definitely accounted for. So the tubes that we're using, in order to have that thing pop up, you're not talking 500 pounds of ammo. You're talking, a couple cars worth of pressure to have that baby pop open and squeeze out into your bag around everything that you have.
Guys, I carry a lot of ammo. No, I'm kidding. That's actually fabulous to know. Now I'm going to order the tube. Thanks. Which is good.
We've gotten really good feedback from that show from police officers, especially that have been trying out those packets like you talked about. They say it actually fits in their vest perfectly.
Right.
It's meant for a couple different things, right? If you go to the range and maybe you forgot your tube at home and it wasn't in your gun bag, for $2 you can buy a single use for that one day of shooting, and it's going to take care of you, without any of the risks. The officers, especially when they're outside training and there's no water and they don't want to drag the gallon jug, they're going to be able to grab a bunch of packets and bring them. Each officer can bring it with them and have that convenience.
So we're talking about range use. What are some other uses for your product that maybe aren't in the firearms industry?
Well, truly, with the ingredients that are in there and the chelating agents and stuff, I mean, anything that's heavy metal. So if you were in a factory and you were working around heavy machinery and, lead comes off of that or heavy metals come off of that, you could use it in that sense. You could use it in the automotive, people that work on cars, brake dust is lead. So you could certainly use it in that form. But really it is a product that will help against whatever industry is working with heavy metals or, lead content or...
What other metals does it neutralize?
It should pretty much neutralize any heavy metal. The testing we've done is against lead.
Okay.
But lead has similar properties to other
Like
heavy
mercury,
metals.
Mercury, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the periodic table, whatever's in that column, basically, right? I mean, if you go back to high school science. Yeah. So what happens if my teenage son is listening to AC/DC and I squirt this at him? Will it get quiet because it neutralizes heavy metal? No. That was stupid. Sorry. Yeah, my family says I'm not funny. Yeah. I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS, 2LOGIC.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. How do you market to customers, whether it's the end user, like me, like a police officer, or a facility, a range, a department? What's your marketing strategy?
I mean, the marketing strategy differs, like you said, depending on the verticals, albeit slightly, right? Our main marketing is basically the product kind of speaks for itself, right? Like with you and all the officers we talked to at the show, once you explain exactly what it does, and people who are within the industry understand what the other options are out there, right? Like D-Lead and the others, they understand, holy moly, this is kind of a hallelujah moment for them. So with the police officers and the municipalities, the marketing aspect really will now gear towards the outdoor ranges that don't have running water, right? Because it's waterless. So like Todd said, you take a couple pouches, you throw them in your bag, and once you guys take a break for lunch, you can clean up. Once you're done for the day, you can clean up. Only thing you're throwing away is a packet. From the retail aspect, for the end users, the messaging is along the same lines, but it really kind of centers on the ease of use, right? What you are being offered when you go to a range to clean up, as you said, Marcus, with the D-Lead stuff, you don't really know what you're getting. It's not nearly as effective as it should be. What are you bringing home to your kids? Again, there's a very fine line of trying to explain keeping everybody safe versus fear-mongering, right? And the last thing we want to do is fear-monger. We're not saying that you're going to wind up with lead poisoning. If you shoot at the range and you go home and hug your kids, they're going to wake up the next day with some sort of illness because of that. But when you look at the science and you look at the studies, it is something that has been proven and something that we are trying to alleviate, right? We want to help everybody enjoy shooting and enjoy the sport and make sure they are being safe. So from an end user perspective, that is kind of our messaging. Hey, you do this. Here's a way you can ensure that not only you, but your family members and your loved ones are a little bit safer at the end of the day when you're done doing this.
It's interesting what you said, and I have a very similar viewpoint. So in my own little world, I don't do the lawsuits that challenge, quote, unconstitutional laws. I don't politic. My attitude is Guns exist in society. That is a fact. I am the educator. Just like you're saying, hey, it might not be for everyone. If you don't use a gun, if you don't have a heavy metal interaction, maybe it's not for you, which is cool. But it does exist. And I have to strike a balance between my advertising. For example, I did an expo right after the attempted Trump assassination, and I got a phone call. They were going to cancel me because they thought I was going to be Mr. Pro-gun. No, I'm Mr. Pro-education, which is one of the reasons why I have the radio show. So I greatly appreciate the balance that you have to do with saying you do have an actual risk. This mitigates the risk. End of story. If you want it, we have it. If you don't want it, go with via con Dios. Go with God. It doesn't matter. So
it's again, it's like you said, it's an education part, right? We need to make sure that the people that are within our target market are educated on what the risks are, and educate them that we have a product that will help mitigate those risks. From that point, the decision is completely yours what you want to do.
We are going to pause for a brief break, but when we return, we'll be continuing the conversation with the founders and owners of Tactical Grit. Stay tuned. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.